to please gather under the tent at this time. We're about to begin the service of Mr. Jerry Hersh. There are, for those of you present here at the cemetery, please, there's a few seats in the second and third row. Please take advantage of that. We also want to welcome everyone that's viewing from online. Just a gentle reminder, if you're here at the cemetery, if you have a cell phone with you, please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. Officiating is Rabbi Shalom Francis.
We're going to begin with reciting Tehillim. Mizmor leDavid Adinoi lo yulo yachzor Binois deshe yarbit seini al mei menuchei sinal leini Nafshi yeshovi yancheni b'maglei tzedek l'man shemoi Gam ki elech begeitz hamoves la'ir ora ki atoi modi Shiftecha mishantecha heimo yinachamuni Tarech lefanai shulchan neged soiroi Yishanta v'Hashem en roishi kaisi rivaya Achtoi v'chesed yedefuni kol yemei chayai V'shafti b'veis Adinoi lerech yamim. Psalm 23. A psalm by David. Hashem is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows he lays my down beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on a path of justice for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in view of my tormentors. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Hashem for long days. We're here to pay respects, final respects, to Jerry Hersh, Moshe Yehuda Halevi Ben Aaron Halevi. I just want to start off with a few words. I had a chance to talk to the family yesterday, and a couple thoughts came to mind. I want to share some words from the Torah, from our rabbis, from our sages, that relate to Jerry's life, and maybe something that will be relatable to us, and we can learn from Jerry's life. Lechovas Halvovas makes an observation. He says, an eye-opening observation about going to work. He says that if we look around the world, we'll see that the vast majority of things in life we don't have to take care of. He says, if you think about it, no one really worried if the sun was going to come up this morning, and no one's really worried if it's going to set tonight. And most people, they open up their eyes and they see, and 90 years later, they haven't put much thought to it, and they're seeing the whole time. And hearing, and smelling, and the vast majority, at least 99% of things that are going on in our life are things that are done automatically. Hashem has already put in, God has already put into the world to happen by itself, and we don't really have to do much. He says, there's just one small part left over that, even though when we eat, our food goes to everywhere it needs to go, but we just gotta, and the food grows and we don't do much about that, but we have to cut it off and we have to make food and we have to eat it. Someone's a good cook. There's a little 1%, someone's 99% is what's done by God, but there's a little 1% that they're mixing the ingredients and they're doing a little 1%. He says that God God left over that little 1% in order, a couple things, but in order that we should be partners in this world and be able to be contribute and be productive, and we could be partners with God in making the world a better place. He also says that, people have different interests and people have different talents, and the amazing thing is that, people need all different types of industries, and hopefully there are people interested in each one of those industries, and that gives every person an opportunity to be productive and help out in the world. We know when man was created, he was brought into the Garden of Eden, and he was commanded to guard it, work the land, and guard it. We know that Jerry was a person, from what I hear, is someone who loved being productive and loved working, and he loved helping people. And sometimes people look at it as, you work to make money. But Jerry realized that wasn't the case. He realized that this is your opportunity to have something left over in the world that you could do and help out with. And even after he retired, he went back to work because he wanted to be of service to others, and he wanted to be productive. I also heard that Jerry did go to school and he was an engineer, even though he didn't go in that business, but he always tried to help out the kids in fixing things around the house, and he always tried to be helpful and always tried to improve the situation and be Mr. Fix-It and help out every situation he could. I remember once, it was on the holidays, one of the holidays, maybe Sukkot or Passover, and my family, we had time, the Chol Hamoed in between the holidays, and we had a lot of family together, and we wanted to go on a trip, and basically, one of my brother-in-laws blurted out, he says, I think everyone's just going on the trip because they want to make mommy happy, and mommy's going on the trip just because she wants us to have a good time. I think no one's interested in going on this trip. And I told him, I think you're 100% right. I said, if I was going on the trip because I want to go on the trip, and everyone else is going on the trip is because they want to go on the trip, then I think we're all not going to have a good time because it's not really a fun place. But if we're all going to make mommy happy, and mommy's going to make us happy, then I think we're all going to have a good time. So our rabbis tell us that the story, a famous bedtime story that's told over, is there were two brothers that lived, two brothers, one was poor and one was wealthy. And the poor brother had a lot of children. The wealthy brother didn't have any children, and they lived on two mountains, across from two mountains. And they had, both were farmers, and the poor brother, he decided that he has to help his rich brother because his brother's going to get old and there's no one to take care of him. And the rich brother said, well, my brother, he's poor and he has a lot of kids. He needs help. So in the middle of the night, the rich brother would go and he would take a couple of his bundles and bring it over to his brother at night. And the next morning he counted his bundles and he saw that he had the same amount as the day before. So he tried the next night. Anyway, apparently on the other side of the mountain, his poor brother was feeling bad for his rich brother. And he said, I feel bad, he's getting old, who's going to take care of him? So he started bringing over bundles the other side at night as well. And the tradition is that they met one night in the middle. And they realized what was going on. And the Medrash says that Hashem said, that's the place that I want to build a temple. The temple in Jerusalem, the Kotel, that spot is the spot that I want to build a temple. So the message over here is that it's important to be of service to others, but really the real joy and happiness comes from that spot in the middle of two people there for each other, and they want to help out each other. Not so many people understand this nowadays. That's where joy comes from. But that's what we're taught, is where joy comes from, in that spot of relationship. It actually says that in that spot, actually, the Holy of Holies, we have the temple, and we have different areas. The holiest chamber was the Holy of Holies, which only the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, was allowed to go in, only on Yom Kippur, once a year. And they actually tied a string to his foot, because if he didn't have the right intentions, he wouldn't come out alive from the Holy of Holies. So in the Holy of Holies, what was there in this holy place? There was the Ark, which we know if you go into synagogue, we have a little bit of a copy. We have an Ark in the front. And on top of the Ark was a man and woman embracing. So this shows that that in the right way, this is the holiest spot on earth. The relationship of this spot where the two brothers met, the place of relationship, the place of people who are there for each other. From what I picked up in my very short time and short meeting with the family, Jerry was a wonderful husband, and he had a very close relationship with his wife and a very special relationship with the children. And he's a person who always really understood this message and wanted to be there for others. I want to end off with one thought. This world is a place where this place is a place of work, and the world to come is a place of enjoyment and pleasure, and vacation, relaxing. However, sometimes you have people who always want to be productive, and always want to be adventurous, and always want to be exploring, and always want to be growing and moving and helpful. And maybe it's a little difficult for them to leave this world. It sounds like Jerry wanted to work and be helpful and productive to the last minute. And it's a very difficult thing for them to leave this world because they want to be helpful and they want to be productive. And they don't want a vacation. They want to be productive. So our rabbis tell us that for sure any children of the deceased, when they continue and they are productive, everything they do is to his merit. If we learn from him, especially from the thoughts that we shared over here about the importance of being service to others and being productive and helpful, we could serve as a merit to him, and he could continue have a merit and continue moving forward, even though he's in his eternal resting place. We should not know from any more pain. I'm going to call upon the family to share a few words of eulogy. I will begin by calling upon his daughter, Wendy Waldman.
When I sat down to think about what I wanted to say about my dad, I didn't know where to begin. So I decided the best place to start is the beginning. My dad was born Morton Jerry on January 6, 1934 in Salt Lake City, Utah. But when he was a child, everyone started to call him by his middle name, Jerry. Being 14 and 16 years younger than his sisters, he was basically an only child. After attending the University of Utah for 2 years, his parents decided it was time for him to spread his wings and leave Utah. He therefore applied to 2 schools, one in California where his sister Marion was living, and the other in Chicago where his sister Bernice was living. He ended up going to Northwestern, and that's how he ended up here. After college, while living with his sister, a neighbor wanted to set him up and gave him a list with 5 names on it. Guess who was on the top of that list? My mom, Rosalie. They went out for ice cream, their favorite thing, on their first date and hit it off. A little over a year later, they were married. So he never got to any of the other names on the list. Along the way, Larry, Debbie, and I were born, and the family was complete. After moving from Chicago to Skokie, they then settled in Highland Park, where they have lived in the same house for 50 years. My dad loved to work, as was mentioned, and was a very smart businessman. Working 6 days a week, he poured his heart and soul into making his small business a success. He had a strong work ethic and was one of the most brilliant people I knew. As mentioned, he could fix about anything. We were always calling him up when something was broken, and in minutes, he could diagnose the problem and tell us what to do. When I reflect back on memories with my dad, there are so many, but one that sticks out in my mind was when I got my driver's permit. And my dad took me on the road for the very first time. So for those of you who live up in the North Shore, you know how if you go down Green Bay Road to Sheridan, the next thing you know, you're in the ravines and it's all twisty. And I kept saying, I think we're going too far. And he said, you could do it, you could do it. Next thing I know, we were at least a half an hour away, but we somehow made it home. Another story that my dad liked to tell over and over was when I was about 5 years old and we were on a family vacation and we went horseback riding. Because I was too little to go alone, my mother made me go with him because she was pulling up the rear. I sat behind my dad on the horse, and I guess I was tired and fell asleep while we were riding the horse. Luckily, I never fell. While my dad did not have a ton of hobbies, he made sure his kids had the opportunity to try everything. Whether it was skiing, tennis, bike rides, or long walks down the Green Bay Trail together, these were things that he did with us, and those then became his hobbies. The one hobby he did love was travel. As a travel agent, my mother had the opportunity to travel all over, and they loved to explore the world together. There are only a handful of states and countries they have not visited, and I think that is how David and I got the travel bug as well. As my parents got older, they wanted to get out of the cold in the winter, and Aruba became one of their favorite destinations. And much to their dismay, and I'm not sure how this happened, they ended up spending 6 winters in Florida, a place they swore they would never go. My dad loved looking out the window at the beautiful lake and watching the birds that liked to visit. My parents would have been married 64 years on September 6th and have been blessed with 12 grandchildren, ranging in ages from 13 to 29. Alana, Eli, Emily, Talia, Jason, Sam, Sarah, Yoni, YD, Ellie, Ariella, and Shia. Did I get all of them? With everyone in different stages of their lives and spread out across the country, getting together was always a challenge, but special occasions always brought us together. And 2 celebrations on their 50th and 60th anniversaries were special, as all 20 of us could be together in Disney and then in Chicago. The last 7 years became difficult as my dad's memory was not what it used to be, and he started to decline. My mom was his rock. She was so devoted and patient with him and took care of him every day. When things got more difficult, she never gave up. Mom, you are my hero. His puzzles kept him busy, and it was something I enjoyed doing with him when I would visit these last few years. My childhood friend, who's here today, said to me the other day that even throughout his illness, my dad had the ability to make people smile and laugh, and I really think that was true. My dad had a lot of sayings over the years. David at one point called them Jerryisms. If there was a problem with a boyfriend, he would say, "It's okay, men are like streetcars, another one will come along in a minute." Same with, we wanted to buy a house and it fell through. Houses are like streetcars, another one will come along in any minute. The one saying that stands out that my father used to say was, "Live every day like it's your last, because one day it will be true." Well, Dad, your day came sooner than we had hoped, but I am comforted in knowing that you are finally at peace. I love you, Dad.
Deborah Miller.
Okay, well, I can't go after that. It's impossible to sum up all the facts I have of my dad, but I can definitively say he was an amazing father, and I will miss him tremendously. I'd like to share a few memories that stand out and give a sense of who Jerry Hersh, my dad, was to me. As my sister mentioned, Dad likes to fix things himself. If only the internet was around in his younger days. I think I take after him a little bit as I try to Google and find do-it-yourself fix-it projects as much as I can. One of my first iconic memories I wanted to share was when I was about 13 years old and my dad decided he needed to go into the attic to address an insulation issue. I was getting ready to leave the house to go babysit, and I hear a huge clunk upstairs. My dad went in the attic, must have lost his footing, and the next thing you know, he's falling through the ceiling in my brother's room, missed the bed, hit the floor, and the ceiling is hanging above him. We were all horrified and laughing at the same time. Luckily, he came through unscathed with just some nasty bruises. Another incident that makes me smile is one afternoon when I was about 14, we decided to go on a family bike ride. For whatever reason, Larry didn't join us. We rode somewhere around the Skokie Lagoons. There were no paths at that time. And out of nowhere, the sky turned dark and started pouring. My mom was with us, pulling up the rear again. We were all in jeans, sweatpants, downpour, soaking, heavy clothes. Dad, being dad, rode ahead as fast as he could to get to the first house he could, knocked on the door, and begged the guy to call my brother so that Larry could come and rescue us. No minivans back then, no idea how we eventually got our bikes home, but some 40 years later, and I'm an avid bike rider, ride through the Skokie Lagoons, and smile when I remember that incident and that amazing ride with my dad. Another fond memory is Dad taking me skiing. We grew up, my parents took us skiing. Well, Mom didn't ski, so Dad was the impetus. And we would go every winter into Wisconsin. I convinced my dad as I got older that we should go skiing out west. Loved the mountains. He decided, sure, he would try it. So my sophomore year, spring break in college, he and I went skiing. We went to Keystone and Breckenridge. Weather wasn't so great. It was freezing outside. And as we're skiing, my dad notices my nose is turning white. Doc finds the ski patrol. They start grabbing, making my nose turn red again. Obviously, I was probably frozen. Otherwise, we went into the chalet, takes my shoes off. My boots are freezing. Dad, being dad, takes my shoes, ski boots off my feet. My toes are frozen. He goes into the bathroom, puts the heater on, and is holding my boots under the hand dryers for like 10 minutes to make sure that I was okay. Fast forward years later, Alana's a baby, my oldest. We take the family, we go skiing back to Park City, Utah, where Dad had never skied as a kid. And our last one final trip, Dad was 60. We skied with the family. Dad's last run of the day, I'm done. Falls, unfortunately, cracked a rib. We all felt horrible. Dad never complained, as he enjoyed skiing in Park City with his family and always treasured those outings. I'll say something that shouldn't be said, that all his grandkids would probably agree with. Alana, my oldest, was his favorite. It wasn't that it was Alana, it was that she was his first grandchild. My dad was so thrilled to be a grandpa. He wouldn't change diapers, but otherwise he was all in. Uh-oh, that's my spot. Here we go. At that time, Bill and I lived in the city when Alana was born, and she was doted on. The cutest was when on any given Saturday night, my dad would call me and say, "Hi, Deb, your mom and I don't have plans tonight, and I'd love to pick up Alana on my way home, and you and Bill can have a night out. And then you can come get her tomorrow. She'll spend the night." We usually took him up on this offer, and he was always sporting a big smile when he showed up at our townhouse. The ritual started with him taking Alana to the corner of Broadway and Hawthorne to see the doggies. Alana loved them. Dad was not a dog person. Nonetheless, he'd take her to see them and make her squeal. Then we'd get the car seat situated in Dad's car, and off they'd go. Rumor has it Mom was not allowed to get Alana out of her crib Sunday morning. When she awoke, when Alana got up and woke, and she would yell, "Uppy, uppy," Dad wanted to come to the rescue and pick her up out of the crib and be the hero. Then they would embark on their 2 to 3 mile walk to the Botanic Gardens, pushing her in the stroller. From a young age, Alana was very particular about her clothes, hat, sunglasses, etc. She would wear a baseball hat with it twisted to the side, and Grandpa would straighten it. Alana did not like that when you twist it back. Who knew an 8-month-old to a 1-year-old would be that opinion about her hat? Sunday morning would come, Bill and I would drive up, we'd meet Mom and Dad and Alana at the gardens for brunch, and the sleep routine would continue another weekend. As we had more children, the routines changed, but never his love for spending time with his grandkids. When I think back to all the childhood family vacations, the Black Hills, the national parks, London and Scotland, Mexico, the ski adventures, playing tennis in the park, bike rides, etc., I can only smile and be grateful for the wonderful childhood I had. My father taught me so many things by example that I only realized once I grew up. I think I am such a hard and dedicated worker, sometimes become obsessed in trying to figure out and fix things, not mechanically like him, because I saw how hard he worked, that he never gave up, and how much it paid off. My kids complain bitterly when I stop and talk to strangers in the elevator or biking or whatever, and I learned that I get that from my dad. My mom calls it the gift of gab. Maybe one day one of them will carry on that tradition. There's a few other traditions I was thinking about after the fact that no one else brought up. So my dad, I guess his mother used to make artichokes, and they used to peel pomegranates. It was a ritual. When I lived in Skokie and we were little kids, Mom would put out newspaper. Mom never cared for the pomegranates. Dad would sit us down in our pajamas. We'd have to get our worst clothes because the pomegranate was stained, and she'd spread it out, and we'd have these little like pomegranate parties sitting on the floor peeling pomegranates. Fast forward years later, I did the same thing with my kids. Not quite to the same extent of on the floor. We'd put newspaper on the kitchen table. All three of my kids love pomegranates, and that's a tradition hopefully they will pass down. Artichokes is another one. Dad loved artichokes. My Aunt Bee apparently taught my mom. My mom would make them. I make them for my kids, and my kids even make them themselves. So it's interesting, and it makes me smile to think of the things that have got handed down from my dad to us and through my children onward. I love my dad, and we'll miss him deeply. I'm glad he's finally resting in peace.
Larry Hersh.
It's interesting to hear my sister speak, their perspective. We didn't compare notes ahead of time, so some of what I wrote, I guess, is speaking last has been pre-said, so I'm not going to repeat that. It's also interesting hearing my sister speak as the commonality or same theme that sort of ran through my father's life. And I guess one of the unique things that we spoke about was him being born in Utah. Not many, don't run into too many Jewish people who were born in Utah. In fact, as I was growing up, when people found out your father was born in Utah, they go, Roseanne Barr. This is going back to the 80s. And other than that, that was pretty much a topic piece. In fact, I was recently out in Utah at the beginning of the month to visit my sister, and my grandparents, his parents, are buried in Utah. So we went out to the Jewish cemetery and went and saw the Savas out there. And sure enough, my father's from Utah. His parents are still buried there. But one of the things, I guess, that my sisters touched on a little bit was my father. He had a quirky sense of humor, or unique, I guess is another way of putting it. And there's certain lines which I guess I remember that he used to say, and I've tried to use with my kids to limited success. But one of those was to the effect that he used to say, Dad, did you get a haircut? And he used to say, no, I got them all cut. And when I used to say to him, when I'd be complaining about working or my job, and his response would be something to the effect, well, they wouldn't call it work if it was fun. And one of the other things, I guess, which as I was driving with my mother over here, my father used to say, I guess, is, you're going to be late to your own funeral, was one of his lines, apropos. One of the other things, I guess, which I remember is my third son, his name is Yitzhak Daniel, which was a little tough to pronounce, so most of us shortened it to YD. He didn't like that. He just kept referring to him as Charlie. So when he came over, he used to call him Charlie. As I was growing up, my father used to indulge, I was the only son, I guess, and I was the oldest, so I had, I guess, two things in my favor. But my father used to indulge me in my hobbies, and I used to have them. Sometimes some of them were a little more long-standing than others. But this is in the 70s. I used to love arcade games and pinball games, and my father used to take me out to play pinball. This was before, at the beginning of the video age era, where now my kids could sit at home or sit home and play on a tablet and do that. That wasn't the time back then. 70s, you had to go to an arcade, you had to put your quarter in the machine, you had to hit the silver ball. So that's something that I remember. In fact, my parents really indulged me. I think I was in 7th grade and bought a pinball machine, arcade one that we still have in the basement. And every time I go down there, it just reminds me of those days. Also, I used to like to go fishing as a kid. Annual trips that my sisters talk about. We used to go fishing. Everybody else used to catch fish, not me. But my parents were very indulgent, and my father was. Coin collecting, that was another hobby. I did have a little bit of an advantage that collecting coins. My father was in the check cashing business, so he had access, dealt with currency regularly, so he would bring home old coins, silver coins, old dollar bills, and it just sort of fueled my interest in that. My sisters also spoke a little bit about my father, my family vacations. We used to go at least a few times with the Shapiro family. We went to places like South Dakota, Wyoming, the Ozarks, and later in life we went to Mexico and skiing, and my sister sort of touched on that. One of the other things we sort of did as a family, when I think about it, I guess wasn't so much affected. My father had this insatiable desire when they were building construction houses, And we'd be driving down the street and you see a house and you just stop. And we go in this house and look construction. I'm like, what are you doing? I just want to see one thing. And you walk into somebody's house that was under construction and walk around and I'm like, we're going to get in trouble. No. We never got in trouble. That was sometimes a Sunday activity. Additionally, his interests as an engineer, as my sisters mentioned, he was very curious, and I think he was very analytical. He was a bit quirky, sort of like a sense of humor, and he liked things to work they should. And I think that sort of touches on what my sister said as far as he'd want to be fixing stuff and things. And I just went through thinking he was always into cars. He liked cars. I remember when I was a kid, he used to every 2 years we got a new car, and I used to say, Dad, why you get a new car? There's nothing wrong with the old one. And he said, they just don't last. And just don't last. So every 2 years, and I don't want my kids to hear this because they're going to think that their father's 15 or 17-year-old car needs to be replaced. But that was one of the things. And one of the cars, I remember a car I think I inherited, it was a Buick Riviera. And it had this feature, a new feature. This wasn't like a Tesla. It had a load lever on the back of the car where if you put stuff in the trunk, the car was supposed to raise up to compensate. And he always wanted to make sure it was working, so he'd always grab us and go home from work and say, come on, sit in the back of the car. We want to see if the load levels are working. And it was like, 10 or 12, 15 years old, whatever. You're like, okay, Dad. And another thing I remember was he really took quite pride in his lawn and looking green outside. And I remember at some point he found out they had a very unique weed in his lawn. It was called the bindweed or something. And he went and got it diagnosed, and he found out there was a particular chemical that used, but it had to be put just on the weed, because if you put it anywhere else, it would kill anything. And I think at some point, and if I'm apologize for making, he went across the street to our neighbors, the Schechters, and Dr. Schechter gave an old syringe. So we'd go out there with a syringe, putting chemical on these weeds that would pop up, so as not to cross-contaminate his lawn and to keep everything so its lawn looked good. Some of the other things, he had a few hobbies. I mean, sisters didn't touch on it, but I'll mention it. One of them is he liked clocks. He liked clock repairs. He went to, I remember when I was at some point a kid, I went with him to a clock repair class he bought a few old clocks and fixed them. And like a bunch of the clocks, when they were all working at the same time, chimed and things like that. So you'd walk into our house, and every hour, every half hour, people would be going, the rings were going off. Sometimes I had a clock in my room, I think went off every 15 minutes, especially when I was sleeping. So, but you got used to it. He also had a little collection of miniature alcohol that people are all fascinated in the family room when you walk in. That my parents used to travel, and they used to go on airplanes, and this is when they used to have more alcohol on planes, I guess, and he used to buy miniatures wherever they were, and they used to put them, and if you make it back to our house, you can see his display of miniatures. One of the other things, I guess, and this is maybe something that my parents, my kids inherited, my father loved meat, and when we were growing up, when my parents built the house, they put a charcoal gas grill in the kitchen, okay, which I guess is sort of unusual back then, maybe even now. And my mother used to cook him steak. He used to have steak quite regularly in his younger days, like every night when he came home from work. And my kids are the same thing. I mean, my kids love their meat. In fact, we got a smoker, and they eat meat more than they should regularly. And unfortunately, I think my father got ill, and he was never able to sort of see their appreciation, preparation, eating, and enjoyment of meat like my father. One of the other things that came across is, I guess, one of the field trips that my father took us on. I think he took Ross Lovey and I on it at some point. I must have been in high school. It was at the U.S. Steel plant, I think it was in Gary, Indiana. It was open for like one day for for a tour, and it was the only time that they had this open. So he took us, I think me, Ross Lovey, and maybe somebody else, and we went out there and spent the whole day waiting in line for like 5 hours to get through this tour, and that was something he just enjoyed. He enjoyed going places and seeing things, and that was like every year he tried to take us. As a graduate of the University of Northwestern University, the engineering department, they used to have like an open house every year there, and he used to take us there to see all the engineering stuff, which was quite novel, and we all enjoyed. I mean, my father, he enjoyed sitting in his family room. He enjoyed listening to his music. He enjoyed reading the newspaper every Sunday. And my sister sort of touched on he had a love for traveling. He used to travel with my mother. He traveled with us, and until the end, he traveled regularly. I guess my father's philosophy, which I guess is somewhat simple: work hard so you could do well, enjoy life. That's what he did.
Jason Waldman.
Okay. For those who don't know us, we are Emily, I'm Jason, and Sam Waldman. We are Wendy and David's children. More specifically, we are numbers 3, 5, and 6 of 12 grandchildren of Grandma Rosalie and Grandpa Jerry. In specific order, we have Alana, Eli, Emily, Talia, me, Sam, Sarah, Yoni, Wadi, Eli, Ariella, and Shia. Ellie, sorry. Don't worry, there will not be a quiz at the end of this. In addition, I am also known as Frick, as my brother is known as Frack, as Grandpa would call us. To tell the truth, we are not quite sure who was Frick and who was Frack, but that was Grandpa's unique sense of humor. While we had nicknames, Emily's special bond was that she shared the same birthday as Grandpa, January 6th. When Emily was young, Grandpa loved to grab her hands and flip her upside down. Our memories of Grandpa Jerry include our trip to Disneyland, Emily's cruise, walking in Northbrook Court, and the many events where we celebrated with Grandpa and Grandma. Everything from soccer to riding our bikes to gymnastics and cheering. Our trips to Chicago would not be complete without chocolate chip waffles from Walker Brothers and a visit to Campus Colors. Ever knew Grandpa had a strong work ethic. As we have begun our careers, we have begun to appreciate why he worked hard and the importance he placed on family. Grandpa Jerry's work ethic, his sense of humor, but most importantly, all of his devotion to family will always serve as an example of how we want to live our lives. We will always love Grandpa Jerry and cherish our memories with him forever.
You're on a time, Hersh.
I'd like to share a few memories on behalf of me and my family, what happened with Grandpa. Although we lived pretty far apart, we lived in Passaic, we lived in Chicago, we didn't see him so much. Just some memories that just stick out that we had. Remember when they used to come visit us a while ago, and we used to go at the mall or store that had an escalator. Grandpa would just take us up and down the escalator. Like we were kids, it was like a roller coaster for us. We'd go up and down. That's one thing I remember that sticks out to me. Another thing that I remember is that when we started collecting coins, me and YD and Ali, we went to Grandma and Grandpa's house. Like Grandpa would show us his coins, his collection, his silver dollars, his gold dollars. He'd even give us some coins. We have some silver dollars from him, some other coins. And he always displayed an interest in our hobbies, like collecting coins like our father did. Also, with the clocks, that as Father mentioned, we would go to the house, like we would be fascinated with the clocks. There would be like tons of them. There's the small ones that you hold, there's the bigger ones on the wall, then you show us, if you twist it, you make the seconds longer, the seconds shorter, all the different stuff to make it exactly the same. And also I just remember one last story I remember that when we're by our house, this is like the one I remember the most. Like he taught us how to do a thing with our fingers. I can show you, go like this. And I remember like outside the house, and Grandpa like showed me it, it took him like a half an hour, he just showing me how to do it. And like I finally got it. I'm like trying to go inside to show my mother, like trying to open the door because I didn't want to let it go because I wanted to just keep it together. I like to just end off with a small Torah thought. There's a custom that mourners eat eggs. So now the question is, it's pretty random. Why are mourners eating eggs? So Rashi is one of the early commentators on the Torah and the Bible. He gives a Torah answer. He says that just like an egg is round, it's not round, it's oval, but it's like a circle. It doesn't end, it's a continuous loop. So too life, when you have something that's hard, some tragedy or something, it's always going to get over with and it's going to continue and it's going to always be good afterwards. So give everyone a blessing that we only continue to merit just joy and happiness to everyone. Thank you.
Ilana Hersh.
All right. Hi, I'm Alana, apparently the favorite grandchild. I have very fond memories of my grandpa, and I wanted to share a few of them. The youngest is when I was around 5 years old. I remember we loved to have M&M parties where we sat on the steps at his house and sorted out M&Ms by color while eating them. Another memory is when we would be at their house when we were younger. Grandpa loved to take us on walks around the neighborhood to look at all of the mica rocks and explain to us about them. He also loved to take us to the park and push us on the swings. Fast forward to my teen years. Grandma and Grandpa took me to London and Paris and were the best sports. Grandpa made sure that I walked into every designer store in our path because he knew how much it meant to me to be in the fashion capital. Who knew all of these years later I would be going back to Paris quite often and constantly getting to reminisce about that trip. As the favorite grandchild, he always made sure I was well fed and that there was something I would eat. We fell into this Italian restaurant one of the nights we were in Europe, and because I liked it so much, he made sure to take me there a second night. I'm thankful for all of the time I got to spend with my grandpa and will always miss him.
And just thank you everyone for sharing such beautiful words. It's so nice to have such good memories and such a beautiful relationship with all the children and grandchildren. At this time, we'll continue the service with the burial. We will, the custom is the four bells will come and we will lower the casket, and we will continue with the burial by hand. There will be shovels, and the custom is that you don't hand someone a shovel, you just leave it there, and the person picks up the shovel afterwards, and everyone's invited to join in the burial. We also are going to say the blessing of Rip Kriya. As we stand up after we lower the casket before we start the burial. this time, it's customary to ask forgiveness from the deceased, in case I know that the family was there for him as much as they could throughout their whole life, and especially during the time of illness. But we always ask for forgiveness in case we didn't do everything we could have. And he forgives us with complete heart. We also say Tzedek Hadin now, which is a prayer that we accept the judgment of God, whether we understand it or not. We understand that death is part of the process of life and part of this world. And it all has a reason, and a deeper reason for God for doing what he does. We'll begin with Tzedek Hadin. Larry, you want to say Tzedek Hadin? And then we'll say it. I'm just going to say it. At this point, we're going to say a blessing that we say upon hearing bad news. We accept God's judgment, and we say a blessing. And the mourners, the family members, who are immediate family members, could join with me with the blessing. And after the blessing, the custom is to rip clothing as a sign of mourning. I have here a scissor. We'll say the blessing together, and I also have a scissor. Everyone wants to rip the ribbon. So we'll rip the ribbon. I'll say the blessing together. We'll say it together. You got it? We'll do it. Baruch atah ad Eloheinu melech haolam dayin ha'emes. burying is one of the last things we're able to do for something for someone. A person wants to be buried and return to the ground. They want a respectful burial place, and they can't do it themselves. And everyone, this is something you could do for Jerry to show him respect. Everyone is invited to join in the mitzvah of burying the deceased.
Alvin is walking back to the tent to finish the service.
We're going to conclude the service with a Kaddish, and we're going to say the Kalmali Rachamim prayer as well. I'm going to give out, there's a special Kaddish to be said at the burial, not the regular Kaddish. The mourners could say along. Here's a Kaddish, fine. You got it? I got a special Kaddish here. It's transliterated over here. Amen.
Yasa, Mesaya, Ulasarcha, Yishon, Lechaya, Alama, Umevane, Kartsa, Di, Yerushalayim, Ulashakala, La, Hikale, Begava, Ulama Ekar, Palkana, Nukra'a min ara la sava palkana di shemaya asre yamalalik kucha bariku umalakase yakre bechayachon ubyomechon uchaye to kol beis Israel to agalat uzman kara avimru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarak Le'olam U'Maya U'May U'Maya Yisbarak V'Yishtabak Yispa'er V'Yisramem V'Yisnaseh V'Yisadar V'Yisaleh V'Yisalel Shmei Tekasha Bareku Elah Min Kol Berkasa V'Shirasa Tush Berkasa V'Nekamasa Ta'amrim Ran Balama V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chayim Elena V'Akol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Say Shalom V'Morah Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Akol Yisrael V'Imru Amen.
Shoichem b'amroimim hansei menuchon nechayno al kanfei ashchino v'malois kedoshim utayrim kezay harakia mazir nes nishmas Moshe Yehuda ben Aaron Halevi sheholach loilamai bavur shebnei hamishpacha Noidvim tzedaka ba'ad haskaras nishmasai Began Eden tehei menuchasai Lechein bal harachamim Yasdireyu b'seiser k'nafav lailamim Yitzor b'tzor achayim es nishmasai Adonai hu nachlasai V'yanuach al mishkavai B'shalayim v'noi maromein O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence in the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones who shine like the glow of the firmament. May the soul of Moshe Yehuda, the son of Aaron Halevi, who went on to his world, because the members of the family are contributing charity, remembrance of his soul. May his resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter him in the shelter of his wings for eternity. May he be bind and may he bind his soul in the bond of life. Hashem is his heritage, and may he repose in peace on his resting place. Now let us respond, Amen. We say one more sentence before we leave the grave, and we say to the deceased, Leich b'shalom, v'senuach b'shalom, v'sameh l'garoscha l'ketz hayamim. Go in peace, rest in peace, and you should merit to arise in your lot in the end of days. At this time, we ask everyone to form a line, two sides, a line over here, people on both sides, and the mourners are to line up over here and walk through the line, and everyone should wish them their condolences as they walk through, and afterwards they join together behind them. Just the four mourners. Just the four mourners.
Everyone but the immediate family, please come over this way to help form.
As we escort the mourners.
Thank you.
Shiva will be observed at the Hersh residence at 890 Dryden Lane in Highland Park, immediately following the interment here today, and into the evening until 8 p.m. This does conclude this service.